No. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cartoons vs. Cancer. I'm your host, Gruppeteer Hannan, and today's episode is a very special one. Today we have Catdog and really freaking embarrassing creator Peter Hannan on the show with us. Peter, of course, the man behind Catdog and really freaking embarrassing, is also known for his slew of books, Petlandia, Big Mouth 10 Songs That Almost Got Me Killed, the Super Goofball series, and about a dozen others. He also teaches at Arizona State University, and I guess he somehow has time to sleep after all that stuff. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Nice to be here. Hi.
And of course, Cartoons vs. Cancer is always to help raise money for Madeline Carlson's post-cancer remission treatment, as well as children at the Dana-Farber Institution in Boston. So if you're interested, and please be interested, drop a donation or check out the link in the description. So since Peter can't physically be in the studio with us today, we usually find a way to encompass his soul, mind, and body to represent him. And since we couldn't find anything that related to Catdog, we found the second closest thing, which was a frat dog,
Yes.
Spuds McKenzie. Whose idea was this?
It was yours.
Right. Well, it's a great idea. Don't worry about that. So, Peter, changing the subject immediately, I'm wondering, how did you initially get interested in animation and illustration?
I actually, from a very young age, I was always just obsessed with doodling on every available surface. So it was never even at the beginning, it wasn't at all that I thought about doing it as a career. It was more like I just couldn't stop doing it. So in grade school and high school, every book I had was covered with stupid little characters, and I was always getting yelled at by teachers for that. I think that a lot of people that I know who work in animation were in the same boat, sort of, like making lots of flip book movies and those big fat paperback books, like algebra books and stuff like that had lots of pages and thin pages. You can make epic flip book movies. So that was really my way in. And then, so I never really, I was oddly never really in a lot of art classes when I was a young kid. My sister was the artist in the family, and and my other sister was kind of a musician. So I felt like I didn't really have a place in a weird way. And I even though I played music when I was a kid and I drew all the time, I never took any lessons in anything. I was kind of like a self-made or self-unmade artist musician guy. So I just never really stopped. I kind of, I went to college and was going to be a fine art painter or a writer. And then in the middle of it, I realized, the one thing I've never ever writing dumb stories and illustrating them, for myself, so why not try to do this for a living? So that's it was kind of like an obsession more than an occupation for a long time.
I've been reading a little bit about, your sort of life before becoming an animator and illustrator and all that. And one thing I found really interesting is you spent some time in Chicago, and you worked in sort of the Chicago blues scene. You and your friends were filming videos or concerts for people like Muddy Waters and Albert King. What was that like?
Yeah, we actually, I wasn't really involved in the blues scene so much, but there was a festival there that happened every year. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was called Blues Fest. Mm-hmm. Maybe it does. I actually haven't thought about it in a while, but we ended up getting a contract. I had a partner, this guy, Bill Horberg, who went on to become a movie producer later. After I kind of went off in the direction of doing kids' books and animation. He went off into the world of feature films. But back then we became partners trying to do local productions. We pitched a bunch of different TV shows, like to Showtime and different places from Chicago. We travel around. But one of the things we did was we got the contract with some other people to shoot video at this thing called Blues Fest. So that's why we ended up shooting all those guys in basically in a 2-week period. It wasn't, it was part of our bigger, ambition to do TV, but it was, in terms of actually doing blues stuff, it was really one big shot that we ended up having to record all these guys. So we did. So it was pretty amazing, really. The lineup was, it was one of Muddy Waters' last concerts. I mean, I think if it was not the last one, it might have been the one before the second to last. So I felt super privileged. So we met him and we got to shoot video.
Did you get to meet any?
There's a big an alley. What's that?
I was asking if you got to meet anybody, any of the musicians or any of the legends you saw on stage.
Yeah, for sure. All of them, like Muddy Waters, Albert King, all those guys. There's Charlie Musselwhite. A lot of them are gone. A lot of them are no longer with us. But Muddy died months after that, and like Johnny Winter came on stage. Just tons of legends, that came because especially the finale of that festival. Muddy was the last guy to play, so all those guys came on stage with him. So there's like an amazing phenomenon of meeting all these people and getting to, didn't really get to know them that much, but at least got to hang out with them for a day or two. So it was pretty cool. Yeah.
And I have to know if your background in filming the blues at all influenced your ability to sing the Catdog theme song.
I think so. It's another thing that like I said, when I was a kid, I grew up in this family where my parents were real folkies. So they were totally into like Pete Seeger and those kind of people. So when I was a kid growing up, they would have these big parties where everybody would sing. So when I was really young, I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, I started playing the guitar, and I would be in these huge parties where I would have the songs that I would sing, and then it would be somebody else's turn to sing a song. So it was really part of the culture of our family. It was pretty cool, actually. I've actually, since I've had kids, and my kids are grown now, but we tried to achieve something like that. Never really did. Like in Chicago, we had a lot of friends who played music, and we would get together. But when I came to LA, everybody was so professional here that it was kind of less relaxed. So it was like everybody was more like, the people were too damn good, really great singers, really great musicians. Like, you can't be that good. It's more fun if you're not. So anyway, in Chicago, we had all these, big party, music parties and stuff like that. But when I was a kid, same thing. There would be like, 50 people in our living room, and everybody at least had one or two songs that they were known for. Everybody from like, old people to super young people. So it was really a pretty cool phenomenon. I thought it was right. So anyway, that's, as I said before, like, I've always kind of been obsessed with writing songs. So when Catdog, when I got this deal to do Catdog, it was actually, it's probably on your list, but I'll just go into it now. When I started, I first got an agent, a Hollywood agent, because of these kids books that I did. And then I ended up pitching ideas to different people from Chicago, still living in Chicago. And one of the things that I got hired by Nickelodeon, like a small department of Nickelodeon called the Creative Lab. And they asked me to come up with some ideas for short films. So I gave them about 10 different ideas of what those could be. And one of them was this thing called Catdog. I actually just drew a very simple drawing of what Catdog would look like. And it actually came from an idea that I had for a book from before that. So it was in my mind, but that's the one they chose. And then while I was working on the scripts of those little short films, are going to be like 90-second films or something like that. Mm-hmm. The song started going through my head. So I just kind of came up with the song, and then I ended up recording it in my little basement studio in Chicago and sending it off to Nickelodeon. And then it actually played a part in going from making 3 short films into making a pilot, because it was a catchy song that people really immediately took to. So I had this kind of funny thing that happened where I sent it off to Nickelodeon. It came kind of viral within Nickelodeon in New York. And then I got a call from the president of Nickelodeon, who was actually singing the song to me. So it was really great. It was like, I just picked up the phone. He's like, hi, this is, it's his name. And I'm the president of Nickelodeon. And I want to brand new for so it was really funny. But he said, the bad news is we're not going to make those short films, and the good news, let's make a pilot. So that's how it started.
Oh, I hope you didn't have any pointers for his singing. That probably wouldn't have ended so well.
That's right. No, it worked out great. It was really nice. It was great. It was actually the easiest of everybody that I've known who's sold shows. In some ways, it was one of the easiest ones, because it was not even, I never even really pitched it as a TV show. I never developed what it would be like blown out into a TV show. Mm-hmm. The short films were going to be Catdog plus Mervis the Pig, and I think Winslow maybe was in it. I can't remember now, but it was like 2 or 3, 4 characters, and so it was not that developed. But anyway, it was and looking back, there were a couple different ideas in those short films that ended up being in the series later. So just different ideas that percolated or kind of remained in my mind all the time. So yeah.
If I could bring it back to the family singing for just a moment, I have to know what your go-to song is for a karaoke bar or something in that case.
Well, I don't know. I haven't done that much karaoke, but when I was in, this is really so self-centered, but when I was in Korea, a lot of stuff, a lot of animation gets done in Korea. When I was over there for Catdog, we went up to karaoke, and the song that first came up that I saw that I would sing was "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog," the Elvis Presley song.
Yeah.
But "You Ain't Nothing But a Cat Dog." So at the time I had just gotten the show, so it was like a very euphoric sort of moment of like, singing really loud, bad Elvis imitation. You ain't nothing but a cat dog.
If it makes you feel any better, I think Elvis is the only person that does a good Elvis impression.
That's true. Yeah. Mine was really bad. It was really super bad.
So, Catdog, of course, is this giant success in the 1990s. It's for those who don't know it. First of all, welcome to the interview, I guess. Second of all, it's two brothers. One's a cat, one's a dog. The shtick is that they're connected. One side's a cat, one side's a dog. But this idea, you said it came from the superhero idea that you came up with. But I'd like to know if it goes any further back. I heard a story you told once about you had a three-legged dog when you were a kid.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, that's another. Well, even pre-Catdog, I had a show in development when I first started trying to sell stuff. I actually had a show pitch that was based on my dog Tipper, which everybody thinks it got named because he would tip over, but in reality, he was named before he lost his leg. But anyway, so Tipper, the three-legged dog, was a pitch. Somebody at one point somebody said to me, like, "Are you only into like weird mutant animals or whatever?" But anyway, yeah. So I mean, it's possible that it came from that. I'm not sure if you saw. You mentioned that you heard about the three-legged dog thing. There's this amazing thing happened when I was a kid where my mother heard Tipper out in the front yard barking. So he was like this kind of incessant barker.
All right.
And she said, "Tipper, you come into the house right now." And like Tipper keeps barking this weird little yelp. And she finally says, "You can come over to this house right now." And like Tipper jumped up and sort of had a little trouble standing up and was like, "What the hell's going on with Tipper?" And he kind of struggled across the lawn, limping. Like usually he's like a three-legged dog, but was a great runner, like super fast and really, great fetcher and stuff like that. So this time Tipper's kind of like limping weirdly toward the house, and she's like, "What is going on with Tipper?" And he runs up the front steps of the house, and she realizes that he's got his front paw on the same side that he's missing his back leg, caught in his collar. So he's literally running to the house on two legs on the same side of his body.
What? How does how does that make sense? What?
I know. It's a complete miracle. I mean, that's why I thought there should be a TV show starring this guy, because he was so, never gave up. He was unrelenting. So it was great. Yeah.
So it was his two, assuming, let's say his left and his right legs.
Yes.
How did he manage that?
Not only that, he ran across the lawn and up like 4 steps under the porch with 2 legs on one side of the butt. That's dedication, right? That's a hero. It's a heroic act. That's it.
That dog has the strength of an Olympic athlete. I mean, that's really impressive.
Well, I also, I grew up in a small town, and Tipper was kind of a famous dog. It was one of the kind of thing where people, because he would run all over town. He was like one of these dogs that seemed like everybody owned him, sort of like he would be eating at different people's houses and stuff like that. And but I would meet people who would find out that Tipper was my dog and be like, "Oh my God." It was like that I knew a movie star. It was like, "Oh my God, Tipper's your dog."
the dog kid. Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. I don't give a damn about you. I want to know your dog. Can I get to know your dog?
So another thing about sort of Catdog is the dynamic between, brother and brother. Is that something that's reflected between you and your siblings?
Yeah, I think anybody. I mean, I think that's what appealed to me right away in the superhero thing that I told you, or that you knew about. Mm-hmm. It was more of a superhero character, like a man's body with a cat and dog head, and they would kind of fly off to try to solve a crime or beat the bad guys, but they would be fighting with each other so much that they could never get anything done. Was the idea, like this internal conflict was so overwhelming to them that they could never possibly save the day. That was the shtick of them. But so I like that idea that that you'd have internal conflict within one character.
Mm.
So they're siblings, but they're also connected, and there's also an old movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but called The Defiant Ones. Did you ever see The Defiant Ones? It's from the 50s, and it's about a black man and a white man who, like a white racist who is chained together with a black guy who are on a chain gang, and they escape together, and they have to travel across the country to elude the barking dogs of the police. Mm-hmm. And it's about them having to kind of bond together. They are literally stuck together, and they have to figure out a way to escape together. Well, so I always like that idea of having to get through life together with this character that you're the opposite of, and you have different wants and needs and desires, but you still have to get through life together. I've always liked that idea. So that's kind of the root of it. And
I think Nickelodeon appreciated you went with a cat and a dog instead of a white and a black gentleman.
That's right. Yeah, right. Would have been a harder pitch.
Would have been a harder pitch. I don't know if the president wouldn't sing the song very well. Yeah. So as you've alluded to, you worked in making children's books. You were an illustrator for a little while. And how was the transition into the the visual, the moving art form of animation, as opposed to working in illustrations or working in books for you?
Yeah, it was. I've met through my career in animation now. People have all different routes that people take to get into this business. So some people come up, go to school, go to college, really, and learn how to work in animation. They come and then they get a lower job in animation as a character designer or background painter or a storyboard artist, and then they parlay that to creating a show or being the showrunner and stuff like that. And with me, it was kind of like, it was more of a backdoor thing of like having a body of work that was interesting to the animation community. So that even though I had literally the only experience I had in animation was those flip book movies I was talking about earlier. I mean, that's really kind of what I'd always thought maybe I'd like to do it sometime, but I never got around to it, never had time to do it because I was working on other stuff. So, it was actually a pretty huge shock to my system because I was coming from really working for myself in my little studio in Chicago. Mm-hmm. With maybe having an editor in New York or maybe having an art director somewhere, but like never really having people working for me or being part of a big staff of people. Yeah. Except for I worked in the newspaper business, so in that case I worked in staff situations sometimes. But in terms of creating stuff, I never did that. So then I went from that to having 70 people below me plus the people in Korea. So more than 100 people all working on trying to manifest my vision, So it's a very heady time of like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? Oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever, So it's a combination of nervousness and excitement. So it was really great, though. It was really an amazing time in that way. That it feels like because everybody really, part of what you want is you want to get the best that everybody's got to offer to realize your vision. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people are kind of like think a little differently than you, and you realize, oh, this different way of thinking actually enriches my vision. So you got to, when you're leading a team like that, you got to look for the good in everybody, figure out the people that are like at least in the zone of what your sensibility is, so that they can enlarge it, but in a good way that makes it better. So it's kind of the trick.
Good advice. I like that.
Yeah.
So one thing that is kind of a reoccurring theme on this show, and something that fascinates me personally, is the early history of Nickelodeon Studios. I just kind of like to sort of get the timeline straight, if you could help me a bit. So I'm assuming that you, because Catdog comes on 1995, I think.
No, 90, end of 97, early 98.
Early 97, early 98. So at this time, Games Incorporated doesn't exist anymore, or now it's just Nickelodeon?
Just at the very end. I mean, I think my deal was with Games, and then it kind of transitioned into So I moved in. Joe had already left. Like Rocco was out the door. Mm-hmm. Arnold was still there, and we were in this building that's. I'm not sure if you know the layout of LA at all, but like there was the old Nickelodeon building was on Vineland, which is in Studio City, mm-hmm. and it was a really pretty small building. The only thing that was going on there, I think, was like some pilots in development, and then Arnold was in production. Mm-hmm. And I moved. I'd made the pilot there. Yeah. And then after that, there was like a temporary home where we went to this place in North Hollywood, but it was because they were building a new studio in Burbank. So when we actually got into full swing production, we moved into the building on Olive that's still the Nickelodeon building, even though they built a new one next to it that's big and tall and beautiful. So, but the first one that they made that was really from scratch, where it's all the colorful, greens and oranges and like kind of the playground look of the place, was the place on Olive that Catdog and SpongeBob came just. We were kind of the first new shows that were being went into production in that building. So.
And what was life like there at the early sort of days of the new Nickelodeon studio?
It was great. It was super exciting because I think partly because the interim building, the first building I mentioned was really tiny and constrained, and then the interim one was like almost like a very boring office building that we just had temporary residency in. And then so we moved into the new place, it was really like an explosion of excitement. It was kind of a very big, exciting time in a lot of ways because they were starting up a lot of new things, and it was just so big and colorful and fun and there was a basketball court inside, stuff like that. It was like everybody was, and I think everybody, because it's like kids entertainment, and because tons of young people work there, and everybody was just fresh out of, a lot of people fresh out of college and really excited to be there, and it was just really fun for everybody. It was like a kind of a, it's kind of a slightly surreal place with lots of goofy architecture and bright colors everywhere. And the recording studio was in the building, so that was really nice because it was like used to be you go to this other kind of funky building somewhere, but everything was kind of consolidated, and it felt like everybody was really happy to be working there and excited. There was less. I think there was probably there are more probably weirder, wackier stories from earlier. Like I've heard some stories having to do early in Rocco days and stuff. A lot of people in Rocco worked on Catdog, so I heard a lot of stories back then where there was a little more rough and tumble, whatever. But there was a real feeling of excitement moving into that new building where it just seemed like everybody was really juiced about it and was happy to be there.
I vividly remember Joe Murray telling us a story about a bunch of executives came in to check on the Rocco crew one day, and somebody just had a gun. Someone just had a gun.
Yeah, they told me the story.
Yep, they just had a gun.
I actually know the guy. I know the guy who had the gun too.
Yep, it's been immortalized Cartoons versus Cancer history. So
yeah, we had some. We had we never had that, but we had on Catdog we had almost in keeping with the theme of attached brothers who have trouble with each other. We had some personality conflicts on Catdog that were almost like the show come to life before our very eyes. So there was some of that. Lots of some confrontations and people that didn't get along with each other. This was just true. Anytime you get a crew together of that many people, there are almost always going to be some personality disorders. The show that I'm working on now, with Joe, it's a really super tiny crew, and everybody gets along great. So it's like a really different situation in a lot of ways. But anyway, yeah.
So I'm not no naming names, but were there almost fights on the set of Nickelodeon's Catdog?
Oh, for sure. There actually, I won't name any names, but there was a couple different people that really, really did not like each other, or like it would come down to. And I actually had this really great assistant back then, really tough woman. She was really hilarious and tough, and she would be the one that would, she would be kind of the person who, like, one of the things about being a creator of a show, and especially on a fast schedule like we were working on, it was a really pretty crazy number of shows we're trying to do in a short amount of time. Yeah. Part of what an assistant does is try to get you from meeting to meeting in a timely fashion, and people that get in her way are like a thing where you're like, don't get between Linda and me because she's like the mother grizzly bear or something like that. Yeah.
So you got a bodyguard.
There'd be times where people were trying to talk to me where she'd just like get between them and start screaming and yelling. It's just really funny. So there was one time in a meeting that went long where she literally came in and just took my chair, pulled me out of the room on my chair, like wheels of the chair out the door. And I'm like, I'm trying to like finish my conversation. It's like, no, we gotta go. So that there's kind of like, anytime there's like a crazy schedule with lots of deadlines, there's lots of people on edge, so that's kind of It
Well,
will happen sometimes.
that is a level of devotion we should all strive to be in our workplace. So, in terms of getting away from the sort of office drama of Catdog and into the show itself, I've seen the early illustrations. I've also seen a lot of your contemporary illustrations, and they're all very, very nice. They have a distinct style, but they don't exactly look too much like Catdog itself does. And I was wondering where the look of the show came from.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit of a job to figure out a way to make my very flat drawings into three-dimensional characters. So I worked a lot with characters designers where we try to figure out ways to do that. I think that in the end, a lot of the more secondary characters look more like my work than Catdog did itself, which is weird. But even though I did the design that led to the final Catdog, I never drew it in turnaround, so I never drew it in a three-dimensional way. And there was something about the idea of Catdog and the action of Catdog that really required a three-dimensionality, especially some of the episodes where there's lots of stretching and coming into camera and like deep space kind of stuff. Well, especially the one we did, which was like a theatrical short, is the best example of that, where we did lots of deeper, kind of more cinematic sort of space. And my drawings in that context would look pretty flat. So I worked with this guy, Rob Porter, who became the creative director of Catdog at the beginning, and he was really the person to help me move from flat Catdog into 3D Catdog, sort of. So so I think in some ways if I did it again, I think there are actually more there are things now in animation you can do that were harder to do back then in terms of retaining some of texture kind of stuff within characters that back then it was harder to do, and now it's much easier because of computer stuff. Like we were one of the last shows to actually do painted cells, so that's it's a pretty different. It was harder to do textures back then, but now it's easier. But anyway, that's kind of how that evolved.
Excuse me. I'm glad you bring up cells. Everybody who I've talked to about cell animation, let's say, has a less than favorable view on it. How did you enjoy the process, or not enjoy, but how did you view the process?
Well, for us, all the cell painting and stuff like that, except for for the guides on how to color that were done over here, everything was done in Korea. So, in terms of being a creator and having to deal with cells, it's almost like you don't really have to even do much about it, except for a couple trips we went to Korea to make sure that everything was on model and looking good. But there's more wiggle room in terms of like things being off register, and there's a lot more to deal with in terms of just quality control back then. And now it's kind of easier to hammer everything down and getting it tight and not slipping around everywhere. But yes, there wasn't really a big problem. Like, when you're a creator of a show, there's so many things you're responsible for, and some things you just go like, that's one thing I'm not going to think about. You know what I mean? And that was not, except for like when the cells came back and I get to choose a few from my collection. Do you choose them based on really just off model or just really strange looking? The ones that I choose from myself, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. The whole thing was, in fact, I still think I should be entitled to more than I ever got. But a lot of times it was kind of like very haphazard. Like they bring in a box of cells and you have to look through and try to find stuff that you want. Yeah. So I just remember looking through, like frantically, like while this, stuff is coming back from Korea while we're still making more episodes. So I never had any time for anything. I just remember sitting in a room quickly, going, I want from this, just grabbing something and like writing down what I took. But yeah, I mostly looked for episodes that I really liked and that and tried to find cells that from moments in the show that I really was fond of. So that was more than that than anything.
Do you have an absolute favorite cell or from the show?
I don't know. I have one that I really like. We had this. There's an episode about this. What is it called? It's this episode where they're at the pool and it turns into a prison. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that one, but like
I don't know the name of it.
Rancid Rabbit is the lifeguard, and he's like super strict, and so it turns into this whole thing where Catdog gets thrown into a hot box. It's very Cool Hand Luke like, but there's one cell that I have that it's just like them stepping out of the hot box, and they're like super they've gotten really skinny and bony and looking really sick and hot and sweaty. I really like it because it just brings back that episode to me. And then I have one there's one where they're dressed up as like army guys, because this is one where they're fighting against the greasers in Catdog House, and I like that one too, just because they're in really funny outfits and they're looking really super stressed out and funny looking. So I like those.
And that kind of brings up something that I'm curious about. Catdog, as well as shows like Rocko's Modern Life and Rugrats and all that, being '90s properties, have kind of made this few years. Nickelodeon's been promoting their '90s programming a lot more lately. For better or for worse is an argument for another day. But do you ever go back or turn on TV and watch episodes of the show?
Not really. Once in a while. I mean, I have all of them on DVD and stuff like that. So once in a great while, if somebody's around, somebody I know that hasn't seen it or wants to see it, I'll watch it with them. And actually, when I was teaching, you said that I teach at ASU, and I don't anymore. I was actually there. It's actually still on my. It's on my LinkedIn thing,
yeah.
And I know there's a bunch of things on my LinkedIn that don't even are just. I still get happy anniversary on your work, and it's like I got to figure out how to say that I don't work there anyway. I actually taught different classes there for a couple of years, but I haven't done it for a while. But anyway, so when I was teaching there, I would show. They would want to see episodes, and I would show stuff. So I've seen the most recent time that I've actually looked at a bunch of episodes at once was when I was teaching, and so there's a few episodes that I don't mind seeing, so those are the ones I share.
Are you the kind of creator who can watch the show and enjoy it, or do you pick out every single tiny thing you wish you could have done?
Yeah,
better?
Pretty much pick out every tiny thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
I think that any artist who's really satisfied with how their work looks didn't try hard enough sometimes.
I have to say that almost everybody I know that works in animation or who's created a show has hardly ever watched. Like Joe's never watched Catdog. I've only seen like one episode of Rocko, so it's just ridiculous. Like even though I love his sensibility and I really like his show, I've never really watched his show and he's never watched mine. So it's really funny. I mean, we're actually pitching shows together now, so somehow the sensibilities are blending in a good way. Like it's actually really great to work on the show with him because I've known him for almost 20 years, a little bit. Never worked with him, and this has been really a joy. We're really having a lot of fun working together. So it's great.
Well, I myself have never watched an episode of Cartoons versus Cancer again, except this one time. Somebody, I did an interview with Rob Renzetti, and I got in an argument with someone about something over My Life's a Teenage Robot, and so I went back in the episode just to prove them wrong. Besides that, I've never watched an episode again. So in terms of the show itself, there's, like you said, a bunch of episodes, very memorable ones. But there's some that are memorable for interesting reasons. I'd love an explanation on certain episodes, specifically the pecan tree episode is one of my personal favorites.
I haven't seen that one I don't think I've seen that one since I mixed it, honestly.
Well, to refresh your memory as well as those watching at home, there's an episode where Catdog just wake up one day and Dog's got a pecan tree growing out of his head. That's it. It's a pecan tree.
It's really surreal. That doesn't happen to you?
It's never pecans. That's the thing. Like peaches, sure, but pecans. I mean,
yeah.
So I gotta know, like, where'd that come from?
I don't think that one. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that idea came from Dean Steffen, who was the head writer for a little while, and he actually recently passed away, unfortunately. But I'm pretty sure that came from him. I used to do these single panel cartoons back before Catdog, and I actually did a drawing of a guy with a tree growing out of his head, and I can't remember even what the joke was of that cartoon. So I know that it's in the back of my mind somewhere, but I think I had it on my wall. So I think it was kind of a combination of me having this idea of a tree growing out of somebody's head, and then him thinking about it happening at the Catdog. But it was definitely a Dean idea.
I'm sure Sigmund Freud would be able to deconstruct that, but I have no idea.
There's a lot of Catdog episodes where they're like, deeply psychologically disturbing moments. There's one where cat crawls inside of dog's mouth to chase the goldfish. And that one, I think.
I do remember that. Actually, speaking of psychologically disturbing, I think my mom over here would blame you for one of my nightmares as a kid because I vividly remember the Teeth for Two episode. So for those at home, there's a scene where the basic premise is dog isn't brushing his teeth, and the dentist is upset with them. Something's gonna happen, and cat retracts into his own body and climbs out of dog's mouth, and he's all you can see the veins and stuff. What was that?
The amazing thing about Catdog, in terms of the physiology of it, is that everything you can imagine that you didn't see in Catdog was drawn at some point by somebody on the show. I mean, just everything from the most obscene version of Catdog, everything. So people's cubicles were just full of really strange ideas about what might happen with this, connected together two characters. But yeah, and I've actually always that one episode about the dentist. I've always been a little worried that could really scar kids for life, to tell you the truth. Not just that moment, but just the whole idea of a really sadistic dentist.
I guess so.
I've lost a little sleep over that episode.
I mean, I don't really get too afraid of the dentist, but I know you don't make them mad because they're the ones who put the metal prongs in my mouth.
Yeah, I know. Well, the idea on that one is that if dog eats bad food, then cat's teeth, if dog eats a lot of candy, then cat's teeth get rotten. It's this whole weird connected thing. So we kind of played on that idea a few times through the different episodes.
I hear it's David Cronenberg's favorite episode.
They're probably most likely, yeah. Absolutely.
So you were saying that there's all kinds of strange things you could think of about how Catdog works. I'm sure the question you've heard a billion times is how does Catdog go to the bathroom? And
the most asked question, absolutely.
The most asked, yeah, that makes sense. I would think it's where's his tail, but I digress. And I don't need answers to these questions personally because I think that part of the fun is just the silliness of the character. But I have to ask you if you think that people asking how does he go to the bathroom or where's his tail?
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of ruins the illusion for people?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's unavoidable. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that after a while, it was it was kind of surprising to me that I'm not sure if you knew about this. Long after Catdog was over, Family Guy did a thing on Catdog, how does Catdog go to the bathroom, which is really funny. It was it was probably funny. I didn't see it, but it was the kind of question that every single person asked. It was kind of funny that took their huge staff of writers, 10 years later to come up with this as a concept. But almost everybody, almost everybody, who's ever talked to me about Catdog has asked about it. I still get asked to this day about it. And I remember Gabor Chupo, who's one of the creators of Rugrats and all this, he the very first time he heard about it, he said to me, "I just have to know, how do they go to the bathroom?" It's really fun.
I like his Hungarian accent. Sounds a lot better when you do it.
Yeah. It was really funny. But that I always told when it was in production and I would meet kids, my main thing was I would reassure them that don't worry about it. They do go to the bathroom. They will not explode. They go to the bathroom. It's just that it's a private thing. We don't know how they do it. So let's keep like that.
Yeah, you don't know.
I mean,
you don't
I've never
ask
seen
him.
Mickey Mouse go to the bathroom, so I don't really know how he does it.
Yeah. I think somebody asked John Kay once if Ren and Stimpy were gay, and he said, "I don't know. I don't ask them." So
that's right. Yeah, it's up to them.
On that vein.
No judgment.
No judgment. It probably just disappears. It's the zero waste theory, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you worked with Catdog. Catdog ends, and I'm actually not the first YouTuber you've collabed with, more or less, because you did a lot of work with Shut Up Cartoons, which is sort of this sub series that the Smosh channel, for those who know that is, did, and you did a show called Really Freaking Embarrassing, which was just asking people really freaking embarrassing stuff about their lives, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think I made 10 or something like that. Yeah, they were I ended up the original idea was going to be that I was going to go on the street and actually talk to people and try to get their embarrassing stories. And then even before I started that, I realized this could take years to find good story. Like, like people are not that, like recording people on the street is hard. They won't tell the stories in a coherent way.
Yeah.
It's going to be really hard. So then I went like, you know what? I have a lot of friends who are funny and embarrassing things happen to them. So I'm just going to ask my friends. So that's what I did. So a lot of these stories were, different people that I know who either were willing to either donate their stories or also, narrate them. So that's how that happened. And like, Andre Royo, who's a friend of mine who was on the Wire. He played Bubbles on the Wire. He told a story on it. It's one of my favorite ones about his first sexual experience. And then, Tom Kenny narrated one that wasn't his story, but he narrated one that somebody else had donated. And there's one about me. There's one, actually Maria Bafford did one. So it was just fun to do. But it was like super low budget, and I literally did everything. So there's zero crew. It was just me coming up with a wacky style to tell this kind of like true story kind of thing. So that's what I did. Yeah. So it was fun. It was pretty fun to do. It was like I did them really fast, and it's funny to hear people tell those stories, even if you don't animate them. It's just kind of like, because I didn't know the story that Andre told me, I had never heard before. And my friend Robert, who told the story about this kind of horrifying experience he had at a bachelor party or a engagement party, is still to this day one of my favorite stories I've heard about it. Just it's really funny. So it was just a fun thing to do.
I've got to ask, what do you have a terribly embarrassing story?
Well, yeah, I told one of them. Well, yeah, I told one of them on that thing. There's one that's actually kind of starring me, but I'll tell you quickly what happened. Back when I was an illustrator in Chicago, it's embarrassing to tell anytime. It was early on. It was before Catdog, and I had literally just bought my first fax machine. It was like, that's how old the story is. Mm-hmm. And I plugged it in upstairs to test it out, and when I did that, I unplugged the phone line to plug it in, and I didn't have a dedicated line for the fax machine yet, but I was going to do that, and I hadn't done it yet. So anyway, so the fax machine was plugged in. My bedroom was upstairs, and the kitchen and everything else was downstairs. So in the morning, and my whole livelihood was based on getting phone calls from newspapers and magazines to get work, right? So because I was a independent illustrator, mostly for editorial cartoons and drawings and stuff like that. So in the morning, I was expecting a call from the Washington Post about this job. So the phone rings. I jump up out of bed, and I'm stark naked, right? And I run to go pick up the phone, and I pick it up, and the phone keeps ringing because it's been unplugged because the fax machine is plugged into that line now. So I run downstairs to the kitchen to answer the phone, and I pick up the phone. I start talking to this person from the Washington Post, and I look over, and the cleaning lady is like standing like 5 feet away from me. And with her mouth over her face, like, oh, freaking out. So anyway, that's the end of that story, but it was really funny at the time. She was horrified.
I guess I'll may as well share one so we're equal. To go back to that Rob Renzetti thing I was saying before, we had him on the show once, and there's an episode of My Life where Jenny, the main character, has this like exo skin that she puts on herself, and she looks like a real human girl. So I was talking to him about it, and I was like, so there's this episode where Jenny just has this giant robotic foreskin, and she just puts it on and just walks, and I heard him do that, and I was like, oh, I think he's just laughing because I'm bringing up the Goofy episode, because I didn't realize that I said foreskin.
How old were you?
And I think I was 15 at the time, so
it wasn't even sure what it was.
Well, if only I were making more of those episodes now, I'd put you.
well, yeah.
Really freaking embarrassing.
So in the comments, we had a question in the comments from, didn't get the username. From Studio, someone, who asked if any actors of the show did any improv, assumingly Catdog, that ended up in the episodes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot. Kenny is an amazing improviser.
Mhm.
And also Maria Bamford. They all were really good. They're Jim Cummings. All those guys are really good at thinking on their feet. So we would almost always record as written, but also we would let them, especially. It was especially helpful to have some improvisation when it was cat and dog going at it, right? So because it was really so personality based between the two of them, that we had a lot going on there. And Tom in particular is just kind of an amazing mind in that way. He can really think on his feet, so he's great. Maria Bamford was also really hilarious because she had such a quirky way of thinking that oftentimes if we did some improv, she would come up with stuff that you would never imagine, and we go like, you know what, I think I like this better. So that's how we definitely did that a lot. It's great.
Would you record the actors for cat and dog in the same room?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, nice.
Almost always. I mean, usually Tom would be in a booth and Jim would be outside of the booth, but they'd record it together all the time. There's a lot of stuff where there'd be overlapping dialogue, but we wanted to keep it separate. Mm-hmm. Move stuff around, stuff like that. So we would often, especially stuff that was actiony, it was like really good to get them together because they would react to each other and their dialogue would be intertwined in a really fun way. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. If anybody else would like to ask any questions, the comment section is open for that. But in the meantime, more ridiculous questions. Pete, have you ever met any conjoined twins before?
No, I haven't.
Really?
I haven't.
Have you ever gotten like an email or a letter from anybody who was a conjoined twin?
I guess not. No, I haven't. I mean, actually, that's a very good question. But no, I haven't. I've met twins who like Catdog, but I've never, and really can relate to it. So that's kind of cool. It's always cool. But no, conjoined twins. No, I haven't.
I wish this could be the part of the show.
I'll be happy to talk to them.
Yeah. I wish this could be the part of the show where we pull the curtain back and, conjoined twins walk out, but we don't. We couldn't find any in New Hampshire. So
this is your life.
Yeah. So growing up in the early 2000s, one thing that was a staple of my lunches most of the time was these Nabisco cheese crackers.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware that the Catdog Nabisco cheese crackers were the hot stuff back in the day. I gotta know, are you a cheese cracker guy? Have you ever had them before?
Actually, that was one of my favorite Catdog products. I really liked it. There was a lawsuit because when they first came out, it had little cat dogs and fish and bones in it, and then the Pepperidge Farm people sued to say you can't have little crackers that look like fish. Mm-hmm. So they pulled them out and they just made them cat dog. They were better. It was actually better to just have all cat dogs. I thought that was my feeling. So I always think about it, like, when people ask me about my about my work, well, my work's been turned into everything from like T-shirts to cheese crackers. So, and so I was proud to be a cheese cracker guy.
Wow, I never thought that the Catdog cheese crackers would be stuck in the middle of a legal suit. That's
funny. Yeah.
You learn something new every day.
I know.
So, as you said, really freaking embarrassing was something that you did completely by yourself. And as you were the animator behind it, you did all the work. Was that very, very different for you than, working with a big team? Was it a lot more enjoyable for you?
No, it was really, it was more of a lark, because it was, in some ways it was kind of like me thinking, well, I'd really like to they asked me if I wanted to do something for this thing, because the guy who was working with those Smosh guys used to be the head of TV animation at Disney, made a pilot when he was around. So I knew him, and they were looking for people. So I pitched this idea. I thought it'd be funny to do. And I knew that I had a couple of stories of my own that I wanted to do. And I figured we could find some funny stories. So, it wasn't a lot of money involved, but it was enough money to make it worthwhile, but it wasn't so much money that you want to share with anybody. So I decided to do it all. So, basically, and I had never, it was really like me kind of like learning as I went how to use After Effects. I'd done some stuff in After Effects before, but I was really like trying to figure out a way to do this in a simple, it's pretty crude. If you've seen it at all, it's crude. It looks kind of like an illustration come to life in a flat sort of way. But I thought it'd be fun to do it that way. I like cheap looking stuff anyway, like South Park and stuff like that. That's got limited animation, but is cool because of it. So that's kind of, I was trying to think of some way to do it that had that kind of immediate sort of feeling to it. It wasn't more fun. Like there's nothing as fun really as having a million people working on a show for you. In some ways, it feels like you feel like you're the center of attention and like, you're the god of this particular little universe. Yeah. So it's hard to top that in a certain way. But this is also kind of it was a fun short-term job that was really fun to do. I really liked it.
Nice. I definitely feel like a god here in the studio. Isn't that right, crew?
As you should. And mother of God too, is there?
So, as I said before, Nickelodeon loves their 90s programming. They're, bringing it back. They're putting it in new blocks. Rocko's Modern Life has this maybe happening comeback. They just confirmed something for Rugrats, yada, yada, yada. Now, obviously, right. You aren't the one at the end of the day who really gets to decide if Catdog comes back, but is it something that you'd be interested in?
Sure, yeah. I've actually, I've kind of waited. They were sort of doing them a little bit in order in terms of when they started. So they, Rugrats and Rocko were early, obviously, so they kind of got to those first, and then I think they're doing something with Jonan for what's Jonan Vasquez's show called?
Invader Zim, yeah.
Invader Zim. So they're doing something with that, but they've been kind of slow going, so that they struggled a little bit getting the Rugrats thing going just because of the diverse group of people that created it. Gabor and Arlene are no longer a couple, so it's a little harder with them. And Paul Germain was involved in that too, and I'm not really sure. I know that they've it's been fits and starts in terms of getting that going. And Joe's movie went really well, but they haven't released it yet. So, and it's really good, so I'm sure they will. But it's taken them a while to release it. So, and I think they're trying to make a bigger deal and maybe possibly make more episodes. They want to make it part of that release if they do that. So everything's been a little slowed down. Like I was actually thinking once Joe did his and Craig, Bartlett made one too. That maybe that's when I would approach them, but it's been a little slow going. Like I think that the Arnold one wasn't a really big hit in the ratings. So I think the management's all changed at Nickelodeon now. There's like brand new people there past couple months. So I'm just kind of holding back and waiting to see what happens next, see what they want to do. Like if they want to keep doing these bringing back older shows, and I'll probably go and pitch something to them. But right now, there's nothing happening.
Did you say that Static Cling is completed but not released yet?
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe everyone doesn't know that.
I don't know if that's public information, but I think it is now.
Joe.
Oops. Yeah.
I think people do. I think people do know.
Oh,
but,
all right.
I probably shouldn't say. Could you erase that part? No, I think it's been done for a while, so I think they're just trying to figure out how to air it. But it's really good. I've seen it. It's great.
Nice. Well, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of the interview, but there's always one question that I'd like to ask before we sign off, and that is, let's say there's someone out there who's watching this and they really want to get into animation. What advice would you give them?
Yeah. So. Like I said before, there's a lot of different ways to get in. You can get in as a writer or as an artist or, as a voice actor or whatever. So it used to be kind of like that Cal Arts was kind of the place to be. Like tons of people that came onto my show went to Cal Arts for either undergraduate or graduate school. And now it seems like there's there's NYU and there's RISD and a few other places that were big in animation. And now there's like way more. Now there's people coming from lots of different colleges. There's people on this show I'm working on now that came out of really tiny schools in Pennsylvania. And like this, it seems like it's way more wide open and way easier to get in from different locales. I've always said, like when I was teaching at ASU, I always tell students, it's better, if you want to create a show, it's better to create something before to show that you've got a vision of something, like either do books or comics or your own animated things or something online. Like don't just say I want to do this thing. Actually do something. Like actually have something that's yours, where you can say like, this is something I made. This is my sensibilities, this is my vision, and this is what I want to do next. Instead of like I want to do my first thing. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that people do is they get jobs. They come up through the ground floor and they actually get a job. Like I said, like maybe they're character designer first and stuff like that. But like they go to school for it and they really know how to draw in the way that you need to draw for animation. They come up through the normal route. So there's kind of different ways to get in.
Nice. And what's going on in Hannanland? Any specific books or any specific things coming up?
Only that I'm the head writer on this new Joe Murray show that's called Let's Go Luna. That's like a little kid show for PBS. It's really great, sweet, funny show. It's really great. So I'm the head writer on that, and then we're also making, to go with that, we're making all these interstitials that are like little short films. So I'm the producer of those. So I'm working on those. So it's and then I'm also writing a bunch of songs for this for the show. So I've got tons. I'm kind of spinning a lot of plates. It's actually the only job I've had other than being the creator of a show where I'm doing so many different things. So it's a really fun job. I'm liking it a lot. So that, and then I have a couple different things that are out that I'm developing on my own, and then I'm actually working on some stuff with Joe that we're going to pitch together. So we're kind of got a lot of plates spinning at the same time.
That's right.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
And
so that's kind of book-wise. I got a couple different books. I have my agent's waiting for me to send some stuff to her that I'm supposed to be working on now, which I haven't been working on. But I've got a couple different things that I'm supposed to be giving her soon. So.
He's been doing interviews. He's been busy.
Yeah.
I've been too busy. That's that Gruppeteer guy who's taking all my time.
Well, I'm gonna have to take your time for just one more minute because I gotta ask. Can we get a little sample of the Catdog theme song?
Absolutely. So I'm a putz when it comes to this. I never say no to this. So anyway, so this is me singing a cappella. So this is the song that I wrote in my basement.
All right.
In Chicago, right? So it goes, one fine day with a wolf and a purr, a baby was born and it caused a little stir. No blue buzzard, no three-eyed frog, just a feline, canine, little cat dog, cat dog, alone in the world is a little cat dog. There you go.
When I lay down at night, I hear that song rattling in my head, and I think you've got it stuck in everybody's head for the last 2 years.
Hey, believe me, I know. It's been stuck in my head longer than anyone. So
ladies and gentlemen, Peter Hannan is the creator of Catdog and Really Freaking Embarrassing, which you can watch on Smosh Shut Up Cartoons channel. He's also the author of such books as Petlandia, Big Mouth, 10 Songs That Almost Got Me Killed, and the Super Goofballs series, all of which are available on Amazon, I'm pretty sure. I think I'll put a link to it. Thank you all so much for watching another episode of Cartoons versus Cancer. Again, if you would like to donate to the cause, there's a link in the description below. Is there anything you'd like to say before we sign off, Peter?
Adios. Thanks for watching. Nice to meet you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We will see you guys later. Goodbye.